This is a dry aged steak. You know, the ones that you pay $200 at a steakhouse for. And this is a steak with mold on it. We're gonna figure out which one tastes better today. Dry aging uses the power of death to make meat taste really good. When you're alive, there's enzymes that help rebuild and repair muscles. But when you die, those same enzymes break down the muscles into some yummy, yummy compounds. After slaughter, enzymes like calpains and cathepsins break down the muscle structure, creating a more tender meat. Proteins turn into amino acids, fats turn into fatty acids, and glycogen turns into glucose. The energy stores in your muscle. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Okay, I just felt like I needed to use that because I never thought I would use that ever again in my life. ATP gets turned into IMP. This, combined with glutamates, also known as MSG, work together to make insane amounts of umami.
The king of flavor.
The lean muscle tissue loses its water, but fat is left untouched, which means it absorbs all the flavor compounds like aldehydes, ketones, and esters, and concentrates it for flavor. But to dry age at home, you have to buy an entire dedicated fridge, $1,800, that controls humidity and airflow. And the piece of meat that you have to buy is basically like this big.
$500
for it to make it worth it, because if you use a little steak, it'll just shrivel into oblivion. And then after you have all that set up, you have to wait at least 45 days, because anything before that really doesn't taste like dry aged flavor. And typically the older you age it, the funkier it gets. So those 60-day, 90-day ages are crazy flavored. And when you finally have your dry aged piece of meat, look how crusty this is compared to this side. You have to cut out like half of it because it's all crusty and dry. Or we could do something that has zero waste, is 1,000 times faster, but might kill you. There are molds that will absolutely destroy you. Like Rhizopus, you'll poop. Blood. Mucor, you'll start crying. Blood. Aspergillus fumigatus, cough. Blood. Aspergillus flavus, cancer. Or liver failure, depending on how much you have. We're not actually winging this. We're gonna be using Aspergillus flavus's cousin, Aspergillus oryzae, also known as Koji. And you probably had this mold before, maybe once. Maybe every day, maybe even multiple times a day, because it's actually used to make miso, soy sauce, and sake. This mold has amylases, lipases, and most importantly, proteases, which convert proteins into flavorful compounds called glutamates, which is also found in
MSG.
So yeah, this is still mold. A lot can go wrong, and this isn't food safety advice. Now it's time to grow mold on steak to make it taste slightly better. So this technique is actually based off of this book. There's a lot of safety information in here, and if you're ever curious, please don't try it without like reading this book first. There's a lot of valuable information that you can learn from that I'm not covering in this video. And before anything else, I'm gonna sanitize all my equipment with alcohol: the tray, the grate, cooler, and sous vide container. First, I'm adding 1.75% salt and sugar on the steak to help it release moisture. This draws water to the surface and creates a slightly sticky environment for the mold to take hold. Next, I mix cornstarch with Koji spores to create a dry, even coating. I'm making sure I'm covering the entire steak and using extra cornstarch just to be safe. It's better to have more than less. I'm adding the steak into the incubator. This is for another project at 90 Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius for 36 hours. I f***ed up. You know, it smells good and it looks white. I thought I could save some time by incubating the steaks with, you know, a project that I'm working on. But turns out that f***ed up these steaks. The project that I was working on had a bunch of dried rice in the incubator, which sucks the humidity out of the air, which basically caused the meat to have these little dry, crusty bits on the sides. Koji didn't get to grow into these areas that are dry and crusty, meaning bacteria also had a chance of growing in this area. On top of that, Koji also gets a little bit more stressed when it's a drier environment. So that causes the Koji flavor to kind of like change. So I think it's better to err on the side of safety and not get sick from this. But damn it, I'm throwing 2 steaks away. I hate recording in public. Do you mind if I take a video? Do you mind if I video a little bit? So I got the dry aged steaks and it cost me so much money. $76.42 for one steak, $89. And I've also learned that it's pretty hard to get a steak that's older than 30 days in my area. The most aged I found was 45 days. So these two steaks have aged for 45 days. Yeah, most places I went to aged it for like 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 30 days max. In my experience, you barely get any of the flavor of the nuttiness or the funkiness if it's aged anything less than 45 days. You know, a lot of love and care goes into it. It takes time, it takes a lot of effort. I get why it's expensive. Yeah, that looks good. Cool.
Hey, let's take a look. Nice.
Moldy steak. Every time I do this, I always get surprised and I'm a little bit freaked out. I don't think there's been a time where I'm just like, wow, a moldy steak. No, this is f***ed up every single time I do it. So everything's white, which is a good sign. And it smells like clean laundry, which means this is a steak probably covered in Koji. So typically in beef, bacteria only grows on the surface of the meat. So that's why you could eat your steaks rare. When we added salt to the surface of the meat, it, one, adds flavor, and two, it slows the bacterial growth. The sugar and the starch was actually just food for the Koji to cultivate on top of the meat. So you don't actually taste sweetness from the sugar when you eat the meat. Because we gave a head start for the Koji to grow, it actually outcompetes all the bacteria like E. coli that can grow on the meat that gets you sick. Now that we have this, we gotta cook. I think part of me wanted to see if a moldy steak could hold its own against a dry aged steak. The one that everybody expects to be good. Because for most of my life, I was trying to be that too. The one that followed everybody's expectation. And now that I've stepped off that path, I think I needed to know if this path that I'm carving could work too. But I'm starting to think whether or not it works isn't the point. Because every time you show up, even when you're afraid, every time you fail and try again, every time you face doubt and criticism, you're not just building something, you're building someone. Whew. All right, time to try everything. Everything has 1.75% of its weight in salt. This is control, dry age, and moldy steak. All right, let's try the control first. Yep, that's steak. It's good. Dry aged steak, that's pretty good. A little bit more beefy, a little bit more umami. The dry aged steak is a lot thicker, and it has like a noticeably darker crust because I think it dried out. Let me taste a fatty piece. The fat has a slight funk to it. It's like concentrated beefy flavor, and I really enjoy that. So let's try the moldy steak now. The crust on the moldy steak is like crispy because of the cornstarch. And that was interesting. It has like a unique flavor. It's like salty, umami, and it has this interesting funk that goes behind it too. It's not just like sweet or anything. The meat doesn't taste sweet at all. I would call it funk, but it doesn't taste like dry aged funk. It tastes like its own thing. Dry aged steak is definitely a lot softer than the normal steak. So mold aged steak has similar texture to the control steak. The mold doesn't actually change the texture of the meat like the dry aging does, which makes sense. This has like a lot of time for like the enzymes inside of the steak to break down the meat, but the flavor, I'd had to give it to the mold aged steak. If I were to compare, I really enjoy this flavor of the mold aged steak, but the texture of the dry aged steak wins for sure. It's more tender, hands down, even with a thicker cut. And I'm kind of curious of like, if I dry aged a steak with mold on it, how would that change like the complexity of the steak? Is mold aging gonna replace dry aging? Probably not. But the price of mold aging is just like 36 hours in a cooler and a sous vide with a little bit of cornstarch and some mold spores. If you're in a budget and you want to try something interesting and new, I would make the mold steak more often just because it's like more accessible and it's easier to do. And it doesn't have to have like months ahead of like foresight. That was pretty cool. But yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good day. See ya.